Well, I see that it's 11 o'clock. So welcome everyone to our disaster recovery webinar for the PowerI. And again, our focus is on the PowerI, but we'll be actually talking about, DR topics in general, and really what we consider key considerations for disaster recovery, and talking about the whole concept of how you prepare for that. It's our pleasure to be spending about 45 minutes talking with you about our experiences and certainly all the thoughts around those considerations for disaster recovery. So just a quick introduction, a couple of people that will be talking with you today. My name is Larry Doobie. I'm president and founder of PSGI. I'm one of the three founders, and we've been providing software and managed services for manufacturers and distributors for the last 13 years as part of that company. But before that, I've been working through, in the industry, and I've been working with the PowerI platform and its predecessors for the last 28 years. As a matter of fact, the AS, it was actually the iSeries are called the Silver Lake box when I first started working with it. So it was long before the AS400 was even. Overall, I have 29 years of experience with manufacturers and distributors and making sure they can achieve the highest ROI possible with the solutions that they're running. We really work to make sure they get everything out of the platforms they run on, the applications they run on, and that those meet their business needs every day. Also joining me today is John Hamill. John is the principal of Turning Point Systems, and he's a seasoned technology executive with over 25 years of experience, and he runs the infrastructure division at Turning Point Systems. He manages in all aspects of the infrastructure division there, including sales, services, product solutions, and everything else for their customers at Turning Point Systems. And prior to Turning Point Systems, John has been in the business for a long time and held positions including sales and sales management positions with IBM and other technology solutions providers. So we've both been around and have worked on this platform and customers of this platform for some time. I think we can share those experiences today and so hopefully give you some insight into the things that we see at our customer sites with disaster recovery. Before we do that, just to make you understand the relationship between Turning Point Systems and PSGI, we've been partners for some time, and we have great synergies in the services and products that we offer. From a PSGI perspective, our history has been with making sure that applications run and those match the business processes that are there at the customer sites, while Turning Point Systems has their history in infrastructure and making sure that the platforms are there to support those things, and we have some synergies that meet in the middle. So between the two of us, we can create great offerings to our customers, really from the plug in the wall all the way to the end user, and making sure that customers are getting all the solutions that they need. So that's why John and I are here to present with you today. Before we go too much further, though, let's just talk about logistics a little bit. You'll be muted during the webinar. So if you want to ask questions, please use the chat functions to the right. We'll be monitoring those throughout the presentation, so if you have any questions at all, we'll try to answer those along the way, but if for some reason we can't do that, we'll certainly save time at the end of the presentation to take care of all the questions that you have. We really want to make sure that you get any information you might need today, so please ask any questions you have. All right, so let's take a quick run through the agenda for the webinar. We'll start out by doing an overview of disaster recovery, what we really think it is, and we think there's quite a bit more to DR than just getting your IT infrastructure up and running again. You should be looking at it from a holistic approach to DR, and make sure you take into account your business operations. And DR testing is certainly part of that whole approach too. We really often see holes in the DR test plans, so we'll discuss approaches for testing along the way. And then certainly we'll look at DR strategies and what you'll need to consider and what should drive you to choose the right direction, the right strategy for you. And of course, we'll save time, like I mentioned at the end, for Q&A. So that's a general description of what we'll be doing today. First, let's look at the general state of DR in our industry. Almost everyone we work with thinks about DR. We know that, and most of them have some level of plan in place. But we often wonder as we work with our customers if these plans will really cover their business needs. I mean, to be honest, we find that they don't in a lot of cases. And looking at survey data, it seems that companies agree with that assessment. 73% of survey respondents from a DRP Council survey as published by CSO Online indicated they were not prepared, and 63% of respondents indicated their budgets were not what they needed. Really, when a real disaster is not front and center, sometimes the budget money is harder and harder to justify. But you really should be justifying it. And the scenario is not that much better for those who did have adequate plans in place because those plans were untested. By the way, if you fail a test, make sure there's an action review process and appropriate steps to be taken, to make sure that you're adequately covered for any disasters that are out there. And the cost of not doing proper testing really can be company ending in some situations.
Larry, what we see there is we see a lot of people basically in a hurry-up offense for 2 or 3 days, trying to get their systems and everything to match, and then they script it back out, and then they put it back out on the shelf where it should be a live working document, always being changed.
Thanks, John. Yeah, that's right. That's a really good point. Hopefully that'll come out in the presentation, that this whole DR process is a living process. Your business is changing, and the things that support that business need to change as well. And just looking at more DR challenges, in another published survey by NetEssence, you can see the DR challenges that many companies face. I think it's interesting actually in this chart that the biggest challenges have nothing to do with business buy-in or management support. It's having resources to execute. We'll talk about that later too. Or maybe just thinking you don't have the resources to execute because you might be able to get those resources in other places. And then the dreaded, hey, this has never happened before, so it's just lower on the list for now. Well, it might be lower on the list for now, but if something happens, then you're really in trouble then. And by the way, then the companies that we work with in general too, both of these surveys don't surprise us when we work with companies. And I'm guessing the survey results may ring true for you too. But taking the attitude of, hey, this has never happened before, the problem is that disasters really do happen from time to time. I often use the words, we don't do brain surgery for the most part, so our risks are more than likely not life-threatening, but this isn't always the case. In the example I have here, it could have been. Some server issues prevented doctors from having access to vital records, and in turn prevented them from performing operations and meeting other medical needs. So, the server was a simple need, but the result was not so simple. For sure, their DR plan failed them in this case. Their tolerance for downtime in this case should have been very small, but they weren't prepared for that. So these things can happen, and sometimes it's just small situations that can really cause some trouble for your business or any other one. Excuse me. Maybe it's a good idea to just kind of go over a DR overview real quick and how we define DR to give a framework for the rest of the presentation. So, we hope that your plan is not a help me plan like on this slide, but we do find that there's a wide range of plans in the companies that we work with, and in some cases those plans are really not focused properly. They do all have more than a help plan, but there are quite a few holes in many of them, and we really want to kind of outline some things that can help you prevent getting holes in your DR plan. A quick definition: DR is a set of policies and procedures that will enable your company to continually do business in the face of a disruption in your IT infrastructure that supports your primary business systems. Okay, so the key words in this statement: enable your company to continue to do business. You'll hear me say that over and over again today. That's the goal of your DR plan. It's not to make IT infrastructure available, although that's almost always the core of the plan. Don't lose sight, don't lose focus on that business being the #1 priority in any of the plans that you make. That's the top of your decision cycle as you work your way down to what's required in your DR plan. And we'll be talking about a top-down design process later in the presentation to help you define that DR plan too. Again, your goal is to continually do business. That's your goal. As we started to talk about in the example earlier, there are a number of reasons why you need to execute on your DR plan, and they're not always catastrophic events like a natural disaster. It could be just a simple air conditioner leak, for example, might cause issues. Or what about something like a major traffic accident that closes down a major highway, and many of your employees can't get to work that day, so they end up having to stay home. Do you have a solution? Well, to be honest, in this case, most companies that we work with have remote access, so more than likely they can get their work done, or at least they're going to get access to work. But, do they really have the processes in place to get the work that they need done? Can they get the information they might need? We want you to think about DR as more than a technical solution. The disaster is just an event. That could be anything. The DR plan, again, focuses on continually doing business. That's what we want your focus to be.
Larry, we see a lot of I call them the data center disasters, where something goes wrong with that building or that room within your building or your site versus anything major catastrophe such as a hurricane or things of that nature. I think the statistics are so high, but I think it's like 90-something% of all disasters happen within your own building for whatever reason, from air conditioning to mold to heat to you name it, anything that prevents that machine from operating.
All right, great. Yeah, thanks, John. Again, we want to make sure that you focus on the things that could happen, and there are many of them. So again, we talk about continuing doing business, and that can mean manual processes too. They're executed along with technology solutions. So it most definitely means that the IT group and the business need to work together to finalize the plan and create a DR playbook. Everyone in testing the plan to make sure that the business requirements are met. We can't stress that enough, that the business requirements need to be met, and that should be the focus. And the business needs to be involved with the IT group.
We see a lot here, Larry, that you really need to understand what will keep the lights of the business going for a certain period of time. What is the core? We'll refer to that later on as Tier 1, but really defining those Tier 1 policies, which reserve into applications, which then turns into people. What's needed to make those things go during a disaster of some sort?
Yeah, great. So on top of those things, whatever could happen within your building, we want you to understand that there are effects to what happens within your building, outside your building. Another item to consider in your DR plan is how much the world keeps getting smaller and smaller every day. Through the technology we use today to do business, we can do business with almost anyone in any place in the world. We're really interconnected. Now, anything that happens within our walls is more likely going to affect companies outside of our walls. So really what that means is our disasters are shared. Or in some cases, our partner disasters are shared with us. You're asking the right questions to your partners. Do they have plans in place that will enable you to continue to do business? And if they're a key supplier, make sure you do ask the right questions, because that could be a very big part of your own disaster recovery plan. Does your plan take into consideration what might happen if one of your key suppliers goes offline for 48 hours? You're prepared if you're the one in the supply chain to suffer disaster. Do your plans take your partners into consideration? You really want to make sure that we're thinking about the wide range scheme of things here and how we impact each other along the way. All those things can really affect what your downtime tolerance is in the end. So there's a lot to think about when it comes to DR. So if anything, we hope this presentation can open your eyes to some of those things and take, like I said, a wider look at what are the things that might be happening. But for sure, the only way to really define what's going to be important to you is to look at business requirements. So you really need to focus on those. Focus on those business requirements and looking at considerations for how you drive the whole process through the business. So John just mentioned about Tier 1 applications, and this is really what we're talking about here, is looking at from a top-down design what allows you to continue to do business. Those are the Tier 1 processes that just cannot go down for any length of time. And it's important, actually really important, to understand that we're not talking about applications but business processes. Orders not getting into the business, and a warehouse able to ship, your ability to communicate. Focus on those processes and the interdependencies of those processes with other functions and people. Then document them. Once you understand those Tier 1 applications, those things that must be up and running, those things that have to happen, now let's look at the applications and information that support those functions. Can any of that be done manually? Okay, so maybe you have a little bit of freedom with the application, but how long can that happen? Is there a part of it that just can't be done manually? Well, that alone, just one of those things in your Tier 1 applications, means your downtime tolerance is very small. And we find that people don't really look at the business processes well enough. They start looking at applications versus business processes. So answering all these questions is going to help you arrive at your recovery time definition, and it'll be a start to creating your Tier 1 application map. And that's what we really want to do. You want to make sure you have the Tier 1 application map that matches up with your Tier 1 business processes.
Larry, just a quick note on that is if you can do some processes manually for a while, how can they be captured and recreated for compliance reasons and things of that nature back into the system once it's back up and running? So it's not only a matter of being able to be run manually, but how can you capture that and put it back into the system? Because you're going to have to be compliant with audits and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's actually a great segment into our next slide. So that's, talking about your tolerance for downtime. So when you're working through that top-down design, that will really give you a process to define your tolerance for downtime. I find in many cases, that no specific process was used, or the process started out with applications versus the business process to define somebody's tolerance. I was working with a company recently in a non-DR capacity, but through that relationship came to learn about an issue they were having with a small application. The small application was in, running part of the business in another part of the world, and this application happened to push orders to a third-party warehouse for shipment. That was the main warehouse that they got all their shipments out of. There was a failure in this case that was software related, and although it was corrected in several hours, during that several hours there were no orders being shipped, and they have hundreds a day. Now, because of the volume of orders, and that most of those are received electronically, there was no real good way to keep up manually. So really they were in a situation where they were simply down, and there was no way to capture that information in a manual way. I happen to also know that this particular company has a 48-hour tolerance in their DR plan. Now, truthfully, if they had started with the business processes as opposed to application, they would know that their plan really wouldn't be effective. They haven't considered the business processes across the board and really what the cost of those business processes were. So really, you got to be thinking about if you could deliver just a fraction of your orders over a 2-day period, would your customers wait for you? Is it better, well, maybe a better question might be, could they wait for you? It's so important for you to test your assumptions and to really make sure your stakeholders in the business agree with your assessment. You've looked at your requirements, you're using a top-down design starting with the business processes. That's where we want to start. So let's look at a little bit at the cost of downtime. Again, our goal is to continually do business. So delayed business is usually lost business. So we hear a lot about people that, it's okay, these orders are going to get entered, they're going to get processed, but if you're down for a couple days, the very best scenario, your customers are patient and there are no repercussions in your inability to deliver product to them. But even in the best case scenario, it's still lost business for you. If you don't deliver product to your customers and in turn they can't use it or sell it to their customers, in your case that's lost revenue in that time period that's never recovered. It's just pushed out into the future. Cost of downtime can be high. So you need to keep those things in consideration. It can be high in terms of actual revenue lost, and it's also high in softer costs like efficiency of your workforce and whether or not they're even able to to do their jobs. And then John was just talking about this. When you do get your systems back online, do you have the correct playbook in place and to be able to recover any work that was done manually? Are your manual processes in sync with your technology plan, basically? Only you can really define the cost of your downtime. We do see a lot of little calculators out there about some people trying to allow you to calculate the cost of your downtime, but it's very specific to what you do and very specific to your business processes. And again, sometimes just one business process, that could be quite costly for you. But the good news is if you follow the methods that we're talking about, really starting with the business function, doing the top-down design, you'll be able to really kind of get a sense of what that cost is to you. And then you can start asking yourself questions like, how much revenue is a half day's worth of orders, or whatever it might be for your particular impact.
One comment there is, and I hear it from different customers at different levels, everything is very specific to your business. Your business is unique. You may be in an industry, but your business is unique. Bottom line is there is always a cost for downtime, always.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. Thanks, John. As you go through this top-down design too, as you're trying to create your DR plan, you should have results that look a little bit something like what's on the slide. Certainly a lot more detailed, But what we're looking for is, you take the time to assess each area appropriately and identify the true downtime tolerance and why that time is either short or longer. Of course, like we talked about before, you'll understand the applications behind that, the business process behind that, documented manual processes. But in the end, you'll identify those areas as tier 1, 2, 3, for example. Again, tier 1 are those systems that you just can't do without. Those are the things that must be up and running. Others, they don't necessarily need to be part of your overall DR plan because you know you can have manual processes to cover those, or in some cases they're just not that important to being able to continue to do business. That's our stake in the ground. So that's what happens when you start building up this map for yourself. That whole DR plan will really start to take shape, and you'll have those things documented.
All right, one quick thing here is if you identify those critical applications, make sure that there's multiple people assigned to those applications. So the guy who's working to get email back up is not the same person to get the phone system back up. It's not the same person to get that critical app. But there's multiple people assigned to multiple things, even in the case when one of those people may not even be able to be there.
Great, yeah, absolutely. Again, that's just another point to make sure that we're talking about the triumvirate of things, right? So you have business processes, the applications and technology to support those, and then the people, and making sure you can meet all those needs. So, after you're going to go through this top-down design process, and you have your business requirements that start to take shape, and again, as I mentioned before, this isn't done just within IT, it's done with IT and the business, and it's really important that the business can take some lead on this too. And you start to line up your downtime tolerances with your DR plan. Well, now it's time to test it. So, this is something that we see a lot of holes in, like I mentioned before. So we want to go through some important topics regarding DR testing. So this may seem a little bit backwards, for us to be talking about DR testing before we even talk about DR strategies. But when I started thinking about this, thinking through testing can really make your strategy that much stronger. So I think it's important to go through, these concepts a little bit. And again, the point's not really to go over how you test your DR solution, but to go over how you approach DR testing in general. Many of you have executed on your DR test plans by getting up, maybe getting the backup of your systems up and running, and simply making sure that you can get major applications up. And that's it. Or maybe someone executes some menu options. Maybe some main transactions are processed, and just to make sure that, that the application is running. I've been part of a few of those along the way, and tried to really encourage people to reach out and do more. But in that case, from an auditor's perspective, your DR plan is tested, and the the checkbox is checked, and you walk away for another year. Remember, your DR plan needs to allow your company to continually do business. So keep remembering that. And remember that as you walk through the with the next few slides with me. We already mentioned that the interconnectivity of our world today and the down or upstream effect on the supply chain. What happens if one of the links is broken? Those links, from a technology perspective, come in the form of integrations and interfaces to our systems. So have you tested those in your test plan? Are those links viable or not? If that happens to be part of your tier 1 application map, then they better make sure that they're part of your test plan. And on the flip side, when systems aren't available, if you ask somebody from the business team to process even a couple hours of workload manually, all right, do they have the documentation they need to do that? Do they even have the capability to document the work that they do? So when it's time to sync up the systems, you have all the information you need. Can they just take the DR playbook and start marching down through it? We're just trying to get across that it's to consider these scenarios where you can't get electronic orders to your company, or where you cannot get information easily to a warehouse, or the 3PL can't deliver, or maybe you're not able to communicate properly. All these thoughts need to take place in your test plan, and make sure you rethink the overall plan and the cost of that plan. So by thinking through these processes, you start to realize that your DR solution is really a living thing. Your business is going to change over time. The things that you do is going to change over time. That tier 1 map might change over time, and you really got to make sure that, again, you're able to continue to do business with it.
Larry, I've got a customer right now who's going not through a DR test, but he's actually moving a data center. And so they are moving data center. It's almost like going through a disaster recovery plan. And the observation in this is that it's taking, and they're doing it correctly, by the way, but it's taking probably 2 or 3 months longer than they expected to make this move. And it's not because it was the interdependencies of the applications and the people on those applications that created this, hierarchy of what gets recovered first, because basically they're going to do a cutover of all their major systems and of all their systems here shortly, and they had to realize how they had to shut certain systems down at certain times and different jobs and things of that nature. So it really, the testing is really good because it exposes the interdependability of all these applications upon one another.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's exactly what we've been talking about, right? It's the all those links that are important to the business and making sure they're in sync, and how important that is. So we're talking about testing all these things. Again, it's important to note that you don't have to test everything. That's not what we're talking about here. But you are going to test every single one of your tier 1 business processes, though. You can't just stick with the core systems. That's for sure. It's all based on those tier 1 again, the tier 1 business processes. Sometimes when people start, as many companies look at what systems most people use and start from there. So they think if they get, for example, their main ERP system up and running, then 95% of their staff can get their work done. Well, that might be true that 95% of the staff uses the ERP system every day, and they'll be up and running. But if that 95% of people getting their work done still doesn't allow the orders to get to the third-party warehouse, and you can't get product to your customers, well, then your customers are just as angry at you as if your entire system went down. So again, focusing on those tier 1 applications and testing everything is really important. Don't just be thinking about what most people work on. It's based on really what your customers need, and thinking about what it takes to get whatever you might need to your customers. That's what needs to be tested. Then simulate that activity. And finally, most importantly, be honest with the results. We also find people, even sometimes, in some cases, document the results of a failed test, but don't do anything about it. So again, it's a living process. Make sure you're honest with the results, and you can take that and learn from it and create a robust plan for yourself. Now, we've sort of alluded to this a couple times. Beyond testing your failover IT solutions, you need to spend a little time testing those processes during the downtime. Can your employees really do what they need to do? Do they even know what they need to do? It's important to test people and the processes. So the goal, by the way, is not to judge whether the people are capable of doing their jobs during disaster, but just to make sure that they have the tools that they need. As we walk people through some testing scenarios, it may become really clear that the DR strategy may need to change rather than trying to build more processes to get those people to do more work. Sometimes there are technical solutions to making it easier for people. And if it's very difficult or impossible for them to get their jobs done manually, then we have to relook at the strategy again. Too often we see just a blanket statement of, yeah, we can do things manually for a couple days, when in reality, the people have not been prepared or even have an understanding of what that really means for those couple of days. Again, after creating your business requirements through a top-down design like we've been talking about, focusing on tier 1, focusing on the business process, you'll be actually more prepared to deal with those kinds of things because you focused on the right starting point in the first place. All right, so we wanted to just talk about testing a little bit to kind of capture some of the essence of the areas that we need to focus on. Again, our title of this webinar were Key Considerations for Disaster Recovery, and those are the kinds of things that we're really talking about. From a business requirement perspective, it's the top-down design model, making sure you talk tier 1. From a people perspective, making sure that the business is involved with IT. And then from a testing perspective, that testing plan matches with that tier 1 application map and business process map. And then finally, on top of that, you're honest with the results of that testing plan, and you can rework whatever you might need to do. So once you get all this stuff prepared in advance and you're actually doing the work to define your business processes that match the DR plan, then you can talk about DR strategies. And we want to take a look at those for a little bit too. Now, certainly, your DR solution is going to be unique to you. Everybody's business is different, and if, like we're talking about, business requirements drive everything, then there's not a DR solution that fits all. There's certainly components to DR solutions that everybody needs to take advantage of, but again, the overall solution and the complexity of that solution is really dependent on your business. We're working with a smaller business right now that's not affected by many supply chain connections, and their tier 1 business processes are really quite limited. Fairly small sites. To be honest, they happen to have some pretty good manual processes in place right now for some of their business functions. So they happen to be a manufacturer, they could continue to make product without too much trouble, and they could actually get things to the customers at least on a limited basis with so in their case, a simple solution might work for them, and their tolerance right now is somewhere around the 48-hour mark for some of their systems, smaller for the critical systems like email, they need to communicate, but for their main business systems, that one seems to be appropriate. Now, on the other hand, we're also working with a larger global organization. They happen to have 24/7 requirements. They have sites all over the world. They're significantly automated, both from both sides of the supply chain, from things on the purchasing side to things on the customer side. They really do need a more sophisticated solution, because truly, if electronically they go down, there's going to be some significant impact to their business there. Now, surprisingly, they actually have a 48-hour downtime tolerance in their particular business plan at the moment too, but we know that's really not realistic. They really need to rework that, and we're trying to help them through that process right now. So because of the importance, I'm bringing this, this slide back again, back to our top-down design. Again, this is really, we started talking about the DR overview, we brought this into play, and we talked about top-down design and testing too, but really what you're going to really be doing when you're building your DR strategy is taking this as the model. So you'll be sitting down with your IT team and your business team and really looking at essential processes that allow you to do business. And like we said, that's processes, order processing, communicating, shipping product, whatever might be important to you. That's what we need to understand. And this is the first step in building your DR strategy, working your way down from there to interdependencies for those processes. Who's involved? Where are they? How do they get access to information? Can that be done manually? Maybe, maybe not. And then on top of that, what applications support those functions? So just like we've been talking about before, this is how it all starts. Making sure that you do that top-down design, looking at business process, and helping it drive from there. Those are the things that you're going to, those are the things that outline what your business can really handle. All right, so once you've done that, you've built that application map. It's a matter of defining, how you want to execute on your DR plan, maybe you can take care of it all on your own. So that's what we're talking about here. Do it yourself. So in a lot of cases, we're working with a number of companies like this. Actually, they have separate data centers with additional equipment. They may have multiple locations running on different hardware, and one of the others could be failover for the other site. They also may have staff to manage and plan this stuff over time. So like I said, I know a number of companies are doing this right now, and they're successful with it. They have their backup strategy and their recovery strategy in place on how they're going to get data back and forth to these sites. In some cases they use replication. In other cases it's a backup to tape strategy or something like that. So it certainly is possible. But there's some key considerations for that too. If you're taking complete responsibility, you need to worry about from the failover systems themselves to the backup storage and recovery process, communications to those failover sites. Are they in one of your data centers, or is that failover site somewhere else? How fast can that location be made available to you, and how fast can you restore your data? More than likely in a do-it-yourself situation, you're going to need people there too. help things get up and running. And are they available to you? Where are they? Can they get to your failover site if you need to? A good test plan like we've been talking about will shake all this out for you. That's for sure, but you just need to go into it with your eyes wide open. So it's possible to do it on your own. We've seen some successful stories there. Like I said, you make sure you go in with your eyes wide open.
I think there, Larry, the key is people, because people get stretched in time of disaster. And I had one customer a few years back, had one, it was a hurricane, and he had to actually, that person had to stay home with the family of his kids, and because his wife was a medical caregiver, and he had to operate a cell phone and had multiple responsibilities throughout that disaster recovery. So the point here is, not only if you're doing it yourself, make sure there's backup key personnel involved.
Okay, great. Yeah, yep. We've been talking about that, like the triumvirate before. It's business processes, applications, technology, and then the people. So keep an eye on it all. I did want to kind of roll the do-it-yourself environment into discussion on the fact that DIY solution can take on a number of forms. One of those is to use cloud services as your failover location too, while you manage your own backup and recovery to that location. There's a lot of flexibility there. You can use the cloud as your DR site only, or you can replicate to it, or you can even just use space when you need it. The benefits of taking advantage of the cloud, are the big one is no capital outlay for you for hardware, and certainly you get some lower personnel impact because of others are taking care of your failover site. So running your own DR process, but taking advantage of the cloud can really be beneficial in a DIY solution. Well, really kind of a hybrid of that. Just a final just topic. Don't forget about licensing issues for software that will run in the cloud too. You'll need to make sure you negotiate those licenses with your software vendors in advance. I mentioned that because there's another company that we worked with. Now, thankfully, they were doing their proper due diligence. They were had a pretty good DR plan in place, and they were doing their testing. Once they did their test plan, they tried to get the software up and running. It failed because of license key issues. It turned out, in this particular case, it took them 2 weeks to get the license code. So their main application would have been down for 2 weeks in that process. Thankfully, that happened during the test process and not, during anything else. So make sure that everything's in place in advance. Well, if you're doing it yourself, certainly one of the pros, you have total control. So that control comes with all kinds of responsibility, though, so to keep your systems up and running. But you'll have all the visibility that you need, certainly at every step of the way. On the con side, there's some costs associated with that control and personnel requirements too. So again, just go into it with your eyes wide open and consider alternatives for your plan. If you think you're going to have to outlay costs for hardware, for example, some hybrid solution might be the right way to go. If you happen to have all that hardware in place today, it's running well, you have the personnel to do that, there's some nice things about that control too. We certainly help people along those lines and make sure that they have their processes in place, and they cover all the right tier 1 applications. They can do it themselves, that's great. But again, go into it with your eyes wide open. There's a lot of, if you really did a proper assessment of those tier 1 business processes. So we mentioned the cloud in the last couple slides, so let's talk a little bit more about that. There's certainly a lot of reasons to look at DR solutions in the cloud, and to be honest, the cloud has really opened up accessibility to full DR solutions to small to medium-sized businesses, where in the past, a company had to absorb full cost of its alternate hardware and data center space. Now with the cloud, you can take advantage of usage-based plans, and those things are affordable to small and medium-sized businesses. So now all of a sudden, there's availability of these things for companies across the board, where that wasn't the case in the past. The other thing is, if you properly implement your DR plan using cloud solutions, your DR solution can be available really quickly. Even accessing your environments for testing is simplified. So all those things are great to consider the cloud for your solution. In general, most businesses today, they're operating at 100 miles an hour. People are moving all different directions very quickly. Business is changing all the time. Demands change all the time. That could be a week-to-week a situation in some cases when new demands are coming into play. So having somebody to focus on a DR plan, sometimes doesn't take the priority that it needs because it's not front and center right then and there. It's that specific business need. You really have to be careful about your people time and making sure they're available for this. And the cloud is like I said, just opens up all new possibilities for people in that small to medium-sized business area.
Disaster recovery, Larry, as a service from the cloud is ranked by a number of companies as the fastest growing piece of cloud use. Just to throw that in.
Oh, great. I mean, that's good to know because, we still, even though it's been out there for a little bit, we still run into people, having concerns about data security and integrity and those kinds of things. And certainly those are things to consider, but just by the fact that that area of the cloud business is growing faster than others gives you a sense that those capabilities are there. Companies wouldn't be moving to that, wouldn't be taking advantage of that if those solutions weren't safe and solid, and that's just proof of that. So, as we talked about in the past, your business requirements drive everything, so it's not one size fits all. And even if you're going to outsource DR, you can still design your own solution from simply just backing up your data to the cloud, excuse me, to having system space offsite as needed, to having dedicated space whenever you need it, to restoring your own data to a fully replicated environment. At a quick glance, it might sound easy, especially when we're talking about the Power I in general. Although this presentation is more generic, the Power I is pretty easy to deal with when we're talking about these kinds of situations. But really, your business isn't running just on the Power I when we're talking about cloud solutions. So you got to make sure you can cover more than that. All the planning we talked about earlier in presentations, still needs to be considered. How far you go with your DR solution again depends heavily on the importance of those tier 1 systems. In my mind, I'm always picturing the Power I as a centerpiece with virtual machines, surrounding it, taking care of those ancillary systems, so that you can take care of those links, to the supply chain that we're talking about, and that will really give you a kind of an image of a robust failover solution. And yep, it can all be in the cloud, so that's all available to you now. Now, as with any solution, though, you need to have concerns on how you execute that plan. Can you access the necessary systems when you need to? How long will it take you to get up and running? And you have proper licensing, like I mentioned before. You still have to think and plan and work out the big picture. And if you're working with a reputable outsourced DR provider, they should be able to help you through those processes too. So I know we're talking about bigger picture and key considerations for overall disaster recovery, but I thought, one of the things we seem to bump into quite a bit is, the smaller piece of cloud services, which is just backing up to the cloud in general, so like eVault solutions. So, that means you're just taking the data that's on your systems, you're backing it up to the cloud. If you need to recover it, you're going to take it back from the cloud and, put it back on your own systems. So I just want to, spend a couple of minutes talking about that. If you are doing that, make sure you're looking for a provider that you can use to, that you're going to use to back up your data electronically. Take some time to get to know their solution. It sounds kind of easy to back up to the cloud, but what you really need to worry about is recovery. To be honest, you want to make sure that you have the fastest recovery time possible. So you want to be aware of what your backup recovery sets look like. You have to be aware of what your backup strategy looks like and what pieces and parts you're pulling off. Together so that you can bring that back to the system. And what kind of guarantees do they give you from restore times? And by the way, are those really real? Let's make sure that gets tested as well. So there's a lot of different ways to design how that data gets pulled off and what chunks that data gets pulled off and how that data can get back onto your system. And that can get a little bit sophisticated depending on what your tier 1 business processes are. And then again, on top of that, do they have people that can help you understand what that means for you? So you really want to have somebody who can help you understand and walk you through the process of backing up just your data to the cloud. So, it's just a process and making sure that you're thinking through the whole thing, not just thinking, how do I back up, but how do I recover and how do I recover quickly?
Larry, with that one, since we're talking about System I, we see this all the time, when you back up data to the cloud, you're basically eliminating tape, which arguably could be good, could be bad, but the process of getting that data back to a system is really the issue, and what that system looks like. So if it doesn't come back to your existing system the way it left it, then you have to reload the operating system, reload the license programs, and then the data comes back in. So, all these have got to be considered, and where am I going to get another system and things of that nature. All those should be considered when you're looking at something like an offsite backup.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. All right, so that was just a little sidetrack with the offsite backup piece. Let's get back to the bigger picture a little bit. One of the biggest benefits of using cloud solutions is typically you're working with a company that's done it before, and they'll continue to do it for other companies. So they have the processes in place to make sure you have a stable environment to fail over to. They have the communication capabilities to handle your employee base, and you can rely on system availability. They have the same concerns as you do. So you end up with a company that has contingency plans. They have a DR solution for your DR solution. Your concern over disaster recovery should be reduced, and your personnel are freed from work that's not strategic for your company. And typically, like I've been talking about, the final overall cost is truly competitive. That's why small to medium-sized businesses can now truly take advantage of services that only larger companies could do in the past. So it's a nice solution that I think everyone should consider. But it's also important that it's not all sunshine and roses. The cloud solution is not a perfect one. You still need to dot the I's and cross the T's for sure. Although most DRaaS providers, disaster recovery as a service, will be able to handle your requirements, don't assume that they handle all your requirements. Don't assume they have the user authentication that you might need. Ask questions about regulatory requirements that you might need, and do they meet those? Do you have the ability to reach out to other cloud-based solutions that are part of your Tier 1 map that may not be in that data center? How does that work? So there's a lot of questions to ask and making sure that that cloud solution is going to work for you. And only by, like I said, dotting the I's and crossing the T's are you going to find that right solution. So, and then on your side, make sure you have the capabilities to handle new bandwidth requirements. So if you're pushing things up to the cloud all the time, you weren't prepared for that. Or even on the flip side, if all of a sudden you have to go over that failover solution, do you have the bandwidth to get your people communicating with that new location? Yeah, I guess the main point is, ask questions. Ask a lot of questions and allow them to help you with that expertise too. A reputable company will help you through that process and be asking you all those questions as well to make sure they can provide the right solution for you. We all want to make sure that, again, your goal is to continually do business, and that's our goal too. All right, so from a summary perspective, really what I wanted you to get out of this presentation is a couple things. It's that there are alternatives out there that can make implementing a DR solution much easier than in the past. And those involve all the cloud solutions that are out there. And that the second thing is you really take an honest look at your DR plan that you have in place today, and think about the areas that you might not have considered, and really kind of apply that top-down design to Tier 1 application process. Did you do that top-down design to create your own business process map? Do you adequately test, and do you have a good action plan if your tests fail? Do you have the manual processes covered while systems are down, and are people able to do that? People are prepared. Are your people prepared to deal with downtime solutions? Is the IT group and the business group working together, across the board? All these things are really important, and I hope that's the considerations that you might get out of this presentation today. And by the way, probably most importantly, don't be afraid to ask for help, because in general we find that overall most companies don't have the human resources, time, capital, or anything to manage a truly viable DR plan. And that's just because how they implement it. Again, how people are stretched throughout the year. So we really need to worry about that. And I think that's pretty much the summary of our presentation today. I hope that that was helpful for you. But one of the things that we wanted to offer is, if you do have a DR plan in place today, we'd love to offer a free DR plan review to you so that we can take a look at it, just kind of help identify holes that you might have. And again, it's just a free service we want to offer for attending the webinar today to help you along. It'll give you just a chance to identify those holes, and then we can figure out next steps for that.
And to your comment, Larry, there's a lot out there that the technology has provided with for us to provide cloud, cloud-based DR as a service, and there's also I spent years architecting do-it-yourself for companies. So we see both sides. We can offer both sides. We see more people. I'll be honest with you, more people coming over to the cloud. But every business is different.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Yeah, one of the last slides I have here is obviously, we do these webinars for a reason. We'd love you to get to know us and get to know the capabilities that we have. We certainly offer those cloud-based disaster recovery solutions through our partnership with Turning Point. And they are really best-of-class, turnkey, cloud-based solutions that we can get up very quickly for you. So, be aware that we do offer those things, and certainly we'd love you to check us out. But as John said, when we're reviewing your plan, we're very open to working with you on your do-it-yourself plan as well. We take a lot of ownership with our customers and making sure that they're successful. That's our goal, and to be honest, we'll be in business a long time if we can make sure that our customers are successful in the ways that they want to be successful. And that includes just looking at the solutions that really work for you, and that's our goal. So that's it for today. I think we did get a few questions come in. So first one is, looks like we have 3 or 4 questions here. The first one is, do you see still a trend to do it yourself or going to the cloud? John, you want to answer that one?
Sure, Larry. I think I just might have mentioned that the trend now is to go to the cloud, and probably the reason for that is with the advent of multi-tenant and sharing resources, it's really come down in price. IT staffs are stretched very, very thin, so the idea of managing an insurance plan versus going back to managing core business operations, it's just so much faster and quicker with the cloud these days, and it's really become price competitive with do-it-yourself. So I'd have to say on that one, cloud's winning out at this point in time.
Okay, second question I got is talk about how easy it is to go to the cloud if you want to go in that direction. They basically had 2 bullets here. How fast can it happen, and what are the typical stumbling blocks somebody might run into?
You mentioned that the System I itself is probably one of the easiest systems to recover and go to the cloud with. We have best-of-breed products that we use. We can literally get you up and running, replicating within a system and testing within a week, days. Now, the stumbling blocks I'll say to that is identifying which key systems and which things on that thing called the System I that you need to recover, right? So you need knowledge of that. That usually takes, people say, well, just want to recover everything. Well, in 99% of the cases, they really don't. The biggest piece in all that, I'll be honest with you, you said the stumbling block is the communication piece, right? You got to get your network people involved, and the network people have got to come over to work with us to set up those VPNs or however you need to communicate with us. And then the second piece in all that is also to establish a secondary or backup methodology of communicating. Maybe it's not only with communicating from your corporate headquarters from the existing machine, but it's also VPNs on key people who have laptops and things of that other nature, so they can get at the system in case if the headquarters building's unavailable. So those are the key areas. But as far as going up and getting in, we can literally do it within a week or less.
Great. Okay. Let's see. Next question was, hey, do people still use tape? Yeah, I know I see it everywhere. So.
Yes, they do. Tape is probably slowly working its way out of mainstream DR. It's still out there. It's still the least expensive. The problem with tape is you got to get it from point A to point B. So, if you're having one of the various, like an Iron Mountain or something like that, come and pick up your tapes, or you're sending that to them, they've got to get that tape over to, say, a recovery center like we operate, and someone's got to load that tape up and get it ready, hoping that you've already had a space available and things of that nature. So if you think through that, just that process, what I told you, that you're already probably, the tape that we're getting is probably a day or two old. We're going to get to us within a day, and then we're going to restore and get you up and running and test those communications. You're already talking 4 or 5 days, or probably a minimum of 4. So, tape is still there. It's still reliable, cheapest methodology. However, and I said reliable, I say that tongue-in-cheek. I've read an article recently that says, 60 to 70%. You're lucky if you get that on a recovery with a tape. Tape goes bad. They've been reusing it. Something happens. Didn't back up properly that one night. Whatever. So that's you add that all together. Tape, although it's still out there, still prevalent, it's slowly being worked out of the systems.
Okay, thanks. And just got one more question here. Actually, this was my favorite one. It's like, okay, how do we get the business people to talk to us in IT? So yeah, that can be some of the challenges that we have, and we've seen that too. I think it's really building the partnership in advance with the key stakeholders in the business, and usually that happens pretty smoothly if you outline the process quite a bit and you outline how much time you might need from the business folks. A lot of that time can be identifying those tier 1 systems could be not together in a room. Just asking the right questions to make sure you get that information from each of the business stakeholders across your organization, and then using that first go round to have the quicker meetings and get people talking. So just like in IT, everybody's busy on all sides of the business, and it's hard to pull people away. But if you gather information in advance, you sort of use that top-down design that we were talking about and give them a sort of a model of what you're trying to accomplish. You may end up with quite a bit shorter meetings. It could be some quick whiteboard discussions to give you that piece to work with. So I think it's the best way to get the business folks involved. One is to make sure you talk to them in the way that the business needs you to talk to them. So you're talking about business processes as opposed to applications, and then going in prepared with a list of questions so that you can limit their time in that process and make it more efficient. Okay, that's it for us today. We want to thank you very much for attending the webinar. Please contact us if you need any help at all, and we'd be happy to do that. You'll be getting emails with a recap of the webinar and copies of it too, or links to the webinar. We are recording this so we can share it. And again, thank you very much for your attendance, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.